In this lecture, we will continue with our discussion on fluid element trajectory, and further we are going to look at angular velocity and vorticity of a fluid element. So, these are the concepts which we will cover in this lecture. These are the key points. So, let us recall that in the previous lecture we discussed about streamlines, and we also took an example problem in which we determined the equation of streamline. We will take our effort forward by next discussing path lines, and then we will go back to that problem and we will obtain the path line equation using the data given in that problem. Let us look at the definition of path lines. A path line is a line traced out in time by a given fluid particle as it moves through the flow field. So, we are going to track a given fluid particle or a fluid element, and all the way in time we are going to follow it as it moves through the flow field. So, the line that it will trace in the process will be called as the path line. It is very important to notice these words, given fluid particle. Now, since the particle under consideration is going to move with the fluid at its local velocity, because it is just being taken to different points by the effect of the overall flow movement, the path lines must satisfy the following equations, that dx dt should be equal to the local flow velocity, dy local flow velocity component u, dy dt should be equal to the local v component of velocity. Similarly, dz dt should be equal to the local w component of velocity, where u, v, w together define the velocity field from point to point, and these are essentially the time rate of change of the position vector. The equation of the path line that passes through the point x naught, y naught, z naught at time t equal to 0. You remember that this was part of the initial condition, will then be the solution to the above set of equations, which satisfies the initial condition that at t equal to 0 these were the values. That means, at t equal to 0 the particle was located at this point, at this location, and subsequently the locations changed. Finally, the solution that you get must be in this form, that x is a function of x naught, y naught, z naught and t. That means, it is a function of its original location as well as t. As the time t takes on all values greater than 0, the coordinates of the fluid particle will be available from the above three equations, and therefore, with that information one can trace the required path line. So, keeping this concept in mind, let us try to go back to that problem. So, we remember the last time equation of the streamline at t equal to 0 was given by x equal to y. Now, for the path line, let us see how we take it forward. So, for the path line, we remember that the conditions are like this, that dx dt is equal to u, dy dt is equal to v, and for us the dz dt or w do not matter, because it is in the xy plane only. So, how do we take it forward from this point? So, we know the functional form u was equal to 1 plus 4t times x, right, and V was equal to y. So, you have to rearrange it slightly, dx by x is equal to 1 plus 4t times dt. This is how you rearrange this part. How do you rearrange the other part, the v component? You do a dy by y equals v dt. Sorry, so there is no v over here, so let us cancel it. So, that is just dt. Now, let us integrate it. So, what you will get out of the integration is natural log x, and then once you integrate this other part, you will get t plus 2t square, and let us have a constant, say c x. So, finally, we absorb that constant and we say that when we remove the natural log, it becomes x is equal to c 1 times e to the power of t into 1 plus 2 t. So, this is the equation for x. Okay. So, you can see that it is actually going to tell us what is the location of that fluid element at a given time. So, when you substitute a time, non-zero time here, you will get the location of that particle, as long as you know the value of C 1. That C 1 value of course, has to be worked out from initial condition. We will do it later. From the other equation, when you integrate, you get natural log y is t plus say some integration constant C y, and then you finally define it as C 2 e to the power of t. From these two equations, as we can see, there are two arbitrary constants C 1 and C 2, we have to obtain them. Let us use the initial condition for that. So, the particle should have passed the point 1 1 at t equal to 0. So, if you substitute that condition, you will get this 1 is equal to C 1 e to the power of 0 times 1 plus 2 into 0. So, which gives you C 1, that means C 1 is equal to 1. From the equation involving the v component of velocity, we will get 1 is equal to C 2 e to the power of 0, which is C 2, and therefore, C 1 and C 2 are both equal to 1, which means that now you have the equations available, where you can obtain the coordinates x and y as a function of t. That means, t has to be substituted and you then get back x and y. But can you obtain an equation where just the connection between x and y is there and you can remove the parameter t. So, these two equations are in a parametric form, where t is the parameter. Can we remove the parameter altogether? Let us take a try to do that. You can figure out that natural log y is equal to t, that is from the second equation, that is from the y equation. If you just take a log of that equation, you get this. Making use of that, you can very easily show that x is equal to y to the power of 1 plus 2 log y. That is what the outcome would be. This is basically the equation of the path line followed by the fluid particle as it crosses the point 1 1 at t equal to 0. While the previous form, if you remember, was a parametric form where other values of t could be substituted. So, we saw what path lines are all about. Let us take the discussion forward. We will now look at streak lines. What are streak lines? They are, or let us define it as a singular. Streak line is a line traced out by a neutrally buoyant marker fluid that is continuously injected into a flow field at a fixed point in space. The marker fluid may be smoke if the main flow involves air or some other gas, or a dye if the main flow involves water or some other liquid. So, it is essentially playing the role of a neutrally buoyant marker fluid. What do we mean by neutrally buoyant? We mean that though the marker fluid is separate from the mother fluid in which it is being injected, but the densities are identical. Therefore, there is no buoyancy effect that works on the marker fluid. It is just laden from one region to the other along with the velocity field of the mother fluid. That is very important, because the fluid which is injected into the flow will otherwise either artificially rise or fall because of a difference in density. Though it is a concept, but it is a very, very important concept. You will see later that when we discuss experiments in fluids and we talk about particle image velocimetry, we are going to put tracer particles into the flow field, and the density of those particles effectively have to match with the mother flow. Now, taking this concept further, we would like to recall that we have seen smoke getting emitted from the tops of chimneys. The smoke is being released from the top of the chimney, and the surrounding flow field takes the smoke away. The smoke trail that you see at a given instant of time is somewhat similar to a streak line, as long as it follows this principle. It does not always do so, though. A particle of the marker fluid, that is at the location x y z at time t, must have passed through the injection point x naught, y naught, z naught at some earlier time t equal to tau. Then the time history of this particle may be obtained by solving the equations for the path line. That means, if this is the streak line, remember that it is different from a path line. If this is a streak line, the streak line comprises of many particles, one after the other, which are released from that injection point. Particles are being continuously released, and they are following one after the other this particular line, which we are calling as streak line. While the path line was what? Path line was a single fluid element. We followed it all along as it traveled. So, here it is a collection of particles and their trajectory. Here it is a single particle and its trajectory. Now, remember, if you take a specific particle, let us say this particle here, it may not have followed the same line as the streak line to reach that point. It may have had its own path line, which may be slightly different from the streak line, and reach that point. The neighboring particle also may have had a slightly different path line, but when you look at the collection of particles, they form this line, which is called as the streak line. So, keeping this point in view is very, very important, that a particular particle comprised of this string of particles of the marker fluid must have passed through the injection point at some earlier time t equal to tau. And then the time history of this particle may be obtained by solving the equations of the path line, like what we did in the previous problem. Subject to this initial conditions, that particular particle which forms a part of the streak line must have been located at that injection point at an earlier time t equal to tau. This is a very, very important concept, and if you look at each particle which forms the streak line, each particle would have a history like this, that another particle would have been there at this point at a slightly different time, let us say tau minus delta t or tau plus delta t, and so on, depending on in which sequence that particle was injected into the stream. As t takes on all possible values in this range tau less than equal to t, all fluid particles on the streak line will be obtained. All these fluid particles have emerged from the injection point at some point of time tau, which lies in the above time corridor. So, when you solve these equations, finally, you are solving this problem subject to the initial condition. and final solution should then come out as x is a function of x naught, y naught, z naught, t as well as tau. The same is for y and z. As t takes on the values tau less than equal to t, these equations will define the instantaneous location of that streak line. You may have noticed that when we observe the smoke trail emanating from a chimney, its appearance changes with passage of time. Every instant of time defines a corresponding smoke streak line. Okay. So, keeping these concepts in mind, let us go back to that problem, and now let us try to solve that problem in light of streak line. So, this is where we ended last time for the path line, and now we are going to work out the streak line. So, what did we already solve as a part of the path line calculations? We had already solved up to this x is equal to c 1 e to the power of t 1 plus 2 t, y is equal to c 2 e to the power of t in the parametric form, and then we had worked out the constants c 1 and c 2. Here we have to be a little careful at this stage. The initial condition is referring to one of the particles in the entire streak line, and that one particle would have crossed x equal to 1, y equal to 1 at a specific time t equal to tau. What does that mean? If you fit this condition for that specific particle, what it means is it will give you a condition like this. The two equations will yield two conditions like this. From this first equation, you get c 1 is equal to e to the power of minus tau times 1 plus 2 tau. Second equation will give you e to the power of minus tau. These are going to be the values of the constants, and then if you plug them in, you get an x equation which looks like this, and y equation will look like this. You see, it has dependency on both t and tau. Now, at t equal to 0, these above equations will yield what? They will yield e to the power of minus tau into 1 plus 2 tau, and y is equal to e to the power of minus tau. So, you have now got parametric equations expressing the coordinates x y. So, the parameter is tau now. Tau is the parameter. Again, we have to eliminate it to get it purely in the form of x and y. So, what can we do? If we take a natural log of this equation, you get natural log y is equal to minus tau. So, tau is equal to minus ln y. If you plug this in into the x equation, what do you get? You get x is equal to y to the power of 1 minus 2 log y. This effectively will be the streak line equation. What does it indicate? It indicates the trajectory of that specific fluid particle which is being injected from the point x naught y naught, where in this case it is 1 1 at t equal to 0. That is what this equation tells you. If you compare the three equations, streamline, path line and streak line, you will find the difference between the three. You can try plotting them. So, we saw that when you have an unsteady flow field, the functional representations of the streamline, path line and streak line, they vary from each other. At home, you can try out another flow field where you just have a steady flow, that means no time dependence, and then check for yourself whether the streamline, path line and streak line equations match with each other or not. With this, we end the discussion on particle trajectories. We will go to the next topic. we will look at angular velocity and vorticity of a fluid element. So, we are following a fluid element, that is what we ended up doing when we were discussing about path lines and streak lines. So, in one case we were following one particular fluid element, in another case we were looking at fluid elements which were being injected continuously from an injection point, and they were behaving like neutrally buoyant marker particles. So, in both the cases we were following fluid elements, but we never bother about the point that whether the fluid elements shape and size and orientation etc. changed as it moved through the flow field. We were only concerned about its location, and since it was an infinitesimal fluid element, it was not very easy to address the issue of change of shape, size, orientation etc. when we were mainly focusing on the trajectory aspect. Now, we are zooming deeper into the flow field and we are looking at the fluid element in a much more zoomed sense, so that we can even capture more details about its orientation and shape as it moves through the flow field. So, this simple sketch tells us that yes, indeed, when it moves through the flow field, it may be following streamlines like one we have shown over here, and we recall that the velocity vector which is existing at this locality is basically carrying it from one location to the other. We find that the cuboidal fluid element at time t seems to have changed its orientation or shape by the time it reached another location some time later, t plus delta t. How can we analyze the change in a simplistic manner to begin with? For that, we will consider the problem as though it was a planar problem or it was a two-dimensional problem. So, instead of the three-dimensional fluid element, we are now looking at a two-dimensional element to begin with, so that we get the picture easily, and then we try to extend it into a three-dimensional situation. So, we see a fluid element which is conveniently taken like as a square or a rectangular element, just because of some of the conveniences associated with this simpler shape, and then we follow it from time t to t plus delta t. So, what is a rectangular element at time t seems to be more like a rhombus or a parallelogram at time t plus delta t. It is only for representation's sake that we have shown the things in a more qualitative sense. Now, if you look at the dimensions, it has dx and dy dimensions here, and at the point A, which is the lower left corner of that element at time t, it has velocity components u and v. Now, as you know, as you move from one point to the other in the flow field, the velocity is going to change. So, if you go dx distance away from that point A to the point C, by the time you reach there, both u and v would have changed. Now, we are concentrating more on v and its change, because we have some idea in mind for doing this. We will see later why. And then similarly, as we move from the point A to point B, which is dy distance away along the y direction, the velocity u would have changed by some amount, and these changes are of course represented in the form of partial derivatives of the velocities along those directions multiplied by the length. So, here it is partial derivative of the v velocity component del v del x, because we are moving along the x direction, and then we multiply it with the length over which we have moved. Here we have moved along y direction. So, we are looking at the gradient of u along y direction del u del y and multiplying it with the distance by which we have moved. So, those define the u's and v's at the point B and C respectively. Now, if these differences in velocities exist for some time, they will make those points to traverse by different amounts compared to A. So, when we look at the same fluid element at time t plus delta t, we find that the point C and the point B have moved in a manner which is not identical to the point A, and therefore, the fluid element has changed its shape. So, how can we quantify those amounts? We will again have to take care of this del V del x into del x and then multiply it with the time interval over which it was effective in order to find out that how much differentially the point C has moved with respect to point A along the y direction. In the same manner, how much the point B has moved from the point A along the x direction. This is how the quantities would matter. So, what we found through this diagram was that as the fluid element translates along a streamline, it can rotate, and in addition its shape may become distorted, which is apparent from this sketch when you compare between these two geometries. The amount of rotation and distortion depends on the velocity field, and as we take the analysis forward, it will become clear in due course that the velocity field is influencing the rotation and distortion. Now, during this analysis, we of course assumed that the element moved from the initial location at time t to the new location at time t plus delta t, depending on the u's and v's which exist at this point. And we notice that there are angular displacements of the sides of the edges AC and AB during that period of time. You can notice that the side AC has moved in the counterclockwise direction by a small angle delta theta 2, and side AB has moved clockwise by an angle minus delta theta 1 during this time. So, this is counterclockwise and this is clockwise. So, we will follow the convention that counterclockwise rotations would be considered as positive in this analysis. Of course, you have to be careful about the different sign conventions that we are following in different contexts. You may recall that when we were integrating pressure and shear stress on a body, we had followed a certain sign convention. Let us take this analysis a little further. We would first look at the side AC and observe how it evolves over time interval delta t. So, as we discussed, distance moved by point A along y direction during the time interval delta t is v times delta t. Of course, at the same time it would have moved u times delta t along the x direction, but we are not so concerned about that as far as rotation of the side AC is concerned. That is why we are keeping silent about this part, we are more busy analyzing the v part. Since the point C is at a distance dx from A, as we explained that it has a slightly different v component of velocity there, and therefore, it would displace by a different rate. And when it applies for a time interval delta t, this is the net displacement in y direction of the point C with respect to point A. And therefore, from the geometry you can define the tan of that angle delta theta 2, and since it is counterclockwise it is positive, and then you can work out that it is del v del x into delta t. If we take it to be a small angle, because if you allow it very small time, then the rotation will also be a very small angle. Therefore, we can assume it to be approximately equal to delta theta 2 in radians, and combining the findings you can define delta theta 2 like this, del v del x into delta t. Now, if you look at the side AB and observe how it is evolving over time delta t, here we are more concerned about the u field. So, when you look at the u field, this is the velocity which was existing at the point B at time t, and when it applies for delta t time, that is how much it will move, and with respect to A, it would move by this amount. So, this is the displacement of B, this is the displacement of A. So, this is basically the net displacement of the point B with respect to A, and that again defines another angle, that is the delta theta 1, but this time clockwise. So, negative comes out to be this. Again, since that angle is small, we define delta theta 1 like this. So, you now have an estimate of delta theta 1 and delta theta 2, and let us define the angular velocities of these lines as the time rate of change of these angles theta 1 and theta 2. So, what we are going to do is d theta 1 dt is limit delta t tends to 0, the ratio of delta theta 1 by delta t, which gives us minus del u del y. Again, d theta 2 by dt is limit delta t tends to 0, delta theta 2 by delta t, which gives us dv dx from these equations. So, we have come very close to putting these results together and finally getting the result for the angular velocity. So, by definition, angular velocity as seen in the xy plane is the average of the angular velocities of the lines AB and AC. So, the two lines are moving at a certain rate in an angular sense, and you are taking an average of that. So, it is essentially arithmetic average of these two, which in terms of the velocity field is gradients of two velocity components. So, now you find the connection between angular velocity and the gradients of the velocity field components. So, here we are considering only the effect in the xy plane, but in a three dimensional motion, effect in other planes will also come in, and in general the angular velocity will have multiple components. Here we are marking it as z component, because that is the component which is coming out of the xy plane, let us say. In three dimensional space, it will have different components along I and j as well, not only k, because the omega z is having the k component, while the omega x is along I, omega y along j, and so on. And the complete vectorial representation comes like this, which can be worked out once you go to other planes and work out the other two components. Here we have just worked out this component in the xy plane. So, the above equation expresses the angular velocity of the fluid element in terms of the derivatives of the velocity components. So, we notice very keenly that the angular velocity of the fluid element is entirely governed by the fluid flow field. How it rotates, how it distorts is all dependent on the velocity field. Vorticity is a very, very important term in aerodynamics. It is defined as the curl of the velocity vector, which is del cross v. Incidentally, that is 2 times this angular velocity. We will discuss more on these in later lectures. Let us conclude by saying that we completed our discussion on fluid element trajectories in this lecture. We discussed more on path lines and streak lines. Subsequently, we discussed about the angular velocity and vorticity of a fluid element as it travels through the flow field. Thank you.